So it's currently 10:15 Mountain Standard Time. I'm currently at the Denver airport awaiting for my flight from Denver to Cincinnati. I had a 5:30 flight from Oakland to Denver because obviously tomorrow is opening day and we finally get the opportunity at long last to discuss games with real significance games that are just real, point blank period. And as I mentioned after the last video that I did to finish up Cactus League play, I mentioned that I wasn't going to be at the game in Sacramento or the two exhibitions against the Tigers on Monday and Tuesday. It's now Wednesday. And opposed to getting into some of the news that came out of those 3 days, obviously with Roop winning the fifth rotation spot, Jelly being optioned to AAA Sacramento, Spencer Bivens and Lou Trevino winning spots in the bullpen, opposed to getting into the roster composition, and as I'm sitting here right now, we currently don't have the opening day roster in full. I wanted to get more in to some big picture stuff going into the season, specifically some things that I'm going to be looking for or monitoring over the course of the first half. I have 10 general things that I'm going to be watching out for. Obviously, it's more than 10, but these are kind of the 10 big ones. I don't think I can do it in 10 minutes, but we'll see. I still got like an hour and change to kill here, so let's get into it. And the first thing that I want to touch on, once we get to the All-Star break, are the Giants going to be in contention? We saw how well they played over the course of Cactus League play, as well as with the exhibitions. I believe they finished 20-6, and there pretty much wasn't any facet of the game where they were lacking. They were hitting, they were pitching, they were fielding, they were hitting with runners in scoring position. The starters look really good. We talked about that over the course of the entire spring. The relievers who are set to be part of this bullpen looked really good. There wasn't really much that you could really nitpick about. The question then becomes, how much does that translate to the regular season? And I think I mentioned it previously, but when we were talking with Logan Webb after one of his starts, the one thing that he mentioned, he was talking with someone who I believe had won a World Series, and they asked how much, I just saw that my flight is delayed, that's beautiful. They'd asked how much a bearing that spring training performance has on winning a World Series, and the person told Webb it doesn't have a lot. The second thing I want to get into is what exactly is going to happen with Landon Roop, Hayden Birdsong, and Kyle Harrison. We know what's going to happen to start the season. Roop's going to be in the rotation, Birdsong's going to be in the bullpen, Harrison's going to be in AAA Sacramento. The primary reason that Harrison's starting the season with AAA Sacramento, of course, is that he was behind Birdsong and Roop. As I mentioned before, Roop and Birdsong made their first starts on February 22nd / February 23rd. Harrison didn't make his first appearance until February 28th. Roop and Birdsong threw more innings, Harrison threw fewer innings, and Harrison just was not built up. But we did see, as Harrison did get built up, that he was more in a position where he kind of looked like the Kyle Harrison that we saw when he debuted in 2023, specifically from a velocity perspective. That velocity was less 91, 92, and more 93, 94 with a sprinkling of 95s in the mix. So the question then becomes, when Harrison is fully built up, is it as simple as he hits a certain innings allotment and they bump him up to the major league team, or do they kind of see how things go with Roop and Birdsong? As we've mentioned previously, Roop and Birdsong and Harrison are all not only going to contribute innings at the major league level for the Giants this season, but they're going to contribute starts as well. So I'm going to be very interested to see what that kind of shakes out, who gets the most starts, who ends up getting the most starts of that group. And for all we've talked about the opening day rotation, I'm very curious as well, what's that rotation going to look like as we get to the end of the first half, and what's that rotation going to look like once the season ends? And on the subject of the rotation, someone who we knew was going to be in the opening day rotation all along, of course, was Justin Verlander, who signed the one-year, $15 million deal with the Giants after the worst season of his career with Houston. And despite some of the numbers last year not being great, we've of course talked about how he was impacted by both the shoulder and neck injuries. Despite all that he had to go through last year from the injury perspective, from the performance perspective, this spring he hasn't looked like someone that's coming off the worst season of his career. The velo is back in the mid-90s. The stuff is moving really well. He's able to elevate that fastball to the top of the zone. He's doing the things that made Justin Verlander. Now, are you going to expect him to consistently hit 97, 98, 99, 100 when he was in his prime? No, but there is an ability to still pitch at that level that is still present. And we've talked about specifically with his curveball, how he's added more horizontal movement to that pitch, how he's moving better down the plane mechanically. Wouldn't be shocked if he's consistently providing 5-6 innings and his ERA is somewhere in the 3s or the 4s as opposed to where it was in the 5s last year. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a very solid contributor to this rotation, even at the age of 42, with him being the oldest active player in Major League Baseball. And speaking of the rotation, again, we're talking a lot about the rotation. Robbie Ray as well is someone that I'm very curious to see how he performs this season, which is going to be his first full season since 2022. Obviously had the Tommy John surgery after one start in 2023, came back midway through the 2024 season, got some innings under him, and has come into spring training with a fully healthy offseason under his belt for the first time in a couple years. We've obviously talked about how he added the changeup to his repertoire. My coworker Evan wrote a story talking to Tarek Skubal about that relationship that's been budding and how Skubal taught Ray to throw the changeup. But in the same way that Verlander has looked really good this spring, Ray has also looked really, really good this spring. That curveball, that changeup rather, is generating a fair amount of whips. The fastball has some life to it. Again, a lot of this is just purely eye test. There's not a lot of savant data that we can really chew on. But Ray looked really good. The performance was there. And now we got to see how that's going to translate to the regular season. Shifting away from the rotation, obviously we got the news right at the end of spring training that Gerard Encarnacion had the fractured hand, more specifically the fractured ring finger. I don't believe he's had the surgery yet, but he's going to have surgery at some point in time. He's slated to miss at least 4 to 5 weeks. So now the question becomes, how exactly do the Giants fill that designated hitter role with Encarnacion being out for the time being? Now, Wilmer Flores was always, in my opinion, going to be the opening day designated hitter just due to him having the status of being a veteran, but he was going to split with Encarnacion. I think the most tangible timeline or the most tangible way the Giants go about this is they have Flores and Luis Matos splitting the majority of reps as designated hitter. You might potentially get a day for somebody like Elliot Ramos or Matt Chapman or Willy Adames. That being said, Melvin did say that with Chapman and Adames specifically, those are guys that want to play the field, not necessarily be slotted in as designated hitters. But that's going to be something worth monitoring. Just how exactly do they fill that designated hitter spot aside from having Wilmer at that position? You also have Lamont Wade Jr. in that mix as well, and him and Flores can flip-flop between first base and designated hitter. And staying on the subject of hitters, how does Jung-Hoo Lee produce in what stands to be his first full season at the Major League level? Obviously only played 37 games last season after crashing into the center field wall, suffering the season-ending left shoulder injury. And it was right around the time that a lot of people in the Giants organization believed that Lee was going to start turning that corner, really start tapping into some of the power that he exhibited in the KBO. I've expressed a lot over the course of spring how high I am on Jung-Hoo given some of the batted ball data. His contact rate only trailed Steven Kwan and Luis Arias, but the big difference between Lee versus Kwan and Arias is that I believe Kwan and Arias' average exit velocity last season was somewhere in the 86 mile per hour range, while Jung-Hoo was around the 89 mile per hour range, which is more so around the 50th percentile. And you also have to consider that he was doing this while adapting to playing in MLB opposed to KBO. He was doing this while not having really any, I don't want to say any idea, but not having that much of a background against a lot of pitchers at the Major League level, while Kwan and Arias did have that advantage. The strikeout rate is also super low. The chase rate is also, the whiff rate is also super low. Those are telltale signs, in my opinion, that there's a timeline where Lee is a very, very solid above average hitter, somewhere in that 120, 125, or even higher OPS plus range. And sticking on the subject of hitters, it's going to be worth monitoring how Willy Adames performs in his first season as a San Francisco Giant after signing the franchise record 7-year, $182 million contract this offseason. We've seen in the past that some guys, when they sign a contract this big, they struggle the first year, and it really kind of varies from guy to guy. We saw it a little bit with, I think, Bryce Harper and Manny Machado. Obviously, Adames' contract isn't nearly as big as those contracts, but then with a guy like Shohei Ohtani, for example, he didn't miss upbeat at all. Adames is also coming off the best season of his career, one where he had a career-high 32 homers. I want to say it was 112 RBIs and 21 steals. Those are all lofty benchmarks. It was arguably the best offensive season of his career, and when you have the best offensive season of your career, it's really hard to duplicate that. So combining those two factors of new city, new team, coming off the best season of his career, and going to a ballpark that is obviously very less hitter-friendly compared to the majority of ballparks in Major League Baseball, how is Adames able to produce, and is he able to provide that presence at the top of the Giants lineup that they really haven't consistently had since 2021? So kind of an extension of Adames is, how do the Giants hit this season with runners in scoring position? I believe last year they ranked 22nd, but as I mentioned previously, hitting with runners in scoring position this spring was something that they really excelled at. I don't remember the exact number, but the last time I checked, they were either at the very top of the leaderboard when it came to hitting with runners in scoring position or somewhere near the top. And Adames is someone in particular that's especially poised to help out in that department. Numbers with runners in scoring position can be a little finicky over small sample sizes, but in Adames' case, this is a career-long sample size where I think his career OPS, I'm forgetting the numbers off the top of my head, his career OPS is somewhere in the 700s, while his career OPS with runners in scoring position, I want to say it's like 850. And when you think about the ways this Giants offense can generate runs, that's something that's going to be very important this upcoming season, especially with Adames at the top of this lineup hitting in that number 2 slot. Moving back from hitters to pitchers, 2 relievers in particular who I'm going to be paying close attention to this upcoming season are Camilo Doval and Ryan Walker. Beginning with Camilo Doval, obviously coming off the worst season of his short major league career. We don't need to rehash that in its entirety. But as poorly as Doval's season went last year, in my opinion, there's still the foundation of a very solid reliever. The velocity is still there. That slider, despite his struggles last season, was a great pitch. Could become a little predictable at times, just considering that at times it was the only pitch he could really go to. But if he's able to combine the effectiveness of that slider and regain some of the control that he has with his cutter and his sinker, go from, I think it was the 5.85 walks per 9 inning down to something more manageable, like 3 walks per 9 innings, that's a very clear path for him to become a lot better in 2024 compared, or 2025 compared to where he was in 2024. Walker, on the other hand, is coming off the best season of his brief major league career, one where he actually ended up with the closer role because of Doval's struggles. Now the question is going to be the ability to repeat that this year, and one thing that's going to be worth monitoring, especially in the early part of this season, is where Walker's velocity is at. It was noticeably down compared to where it was last year. I believe he only had 1 outing in a stadium with Savant data, and the velocity was noticeably down. It was a couple ticks down. And given that a lot of Walker's effectiveness and a lot of relievers' effectiveness in general hinges on the ability to combine that velocity with that crossfire, with his breaking stuff, it is going to be worth seeing like where exactly that sits at over the course of this season. It is worth wondering if Walker can maintain his effectiveness this season if the velocity isn't where it was last season. And the final point I want to get into, something away from the Major League team, is where does Bryce Eldridge end up by the time the All-Star break rolls around? At this point in time, we're still unsure if he's going to start the season with AA Richmond or AAA Sacramento. It's very possible that he starts with either of those affiliates. He only played 8 games with Richmond before earning the promotion to Sacramento, and part of the reason he earned that promotion was that so he could continue getting ramped up for the Arizona Fall League. I wouldn't be surprised if they have him in AA to get him more reps at that level. I wouldn't be surprised if they have him in AAA, given how well he performed in a limited sample both at AAA and the Arizona Fall League. Are we going to see him in the majors at some point this season? It's hard to tell. It's really going to hinge not only on how well he performs offensively, but whether he's able to make considerable strides on the defensive end of the ball. But that is a question. That's something to look forward to the second half. I think that'll do it for today. I don't know how long this video is going to end up being, but I will say it will help as far as this flight from Denver to Cincinnati and being able to kill a little bit of time. But the next time y'all see me, it will be at Great American Ballpark on Thursday. Excited for my first season on the Giants beat to begin in earnest. See y'all then.